This crafty scheme was not in Labour's manifesto. Even the Cabinet thinks this whole thing is a fantasy. The Secretary of State cannot even bring herself to tweet about it. Why does the Prime Minister keep handing her his steaming messes to scoop up? The migration argument having totally bombed, the migration argument is totally bombed, and you heard it here today. She and the Prime Minister are now reframing this whole thing as the route to better online services. No more rifling around utility bills. Her whole statement today, not an ID you hear today, not an ID, a key. But they are deliberately conflating two very different things. Better, more convenient online services were already coming in. We already had right to work and rent checks, convenient DBS checks, driving licence renewals, all designed with choice, consent and privacy in mind. Paper options retained, nobody forced down the digital route, and trust as the key. Private identity providers enabled. This is not about Luddites versus modernisers. This is about the fact that Labour cannot resist its big, fat socialist dreams. Centralised databases, state mandations, big money, the exclusion of private sector expertise. Why create this honeypot for hackers? How much is this going to cost? And why should we trust Labour to be the verifier of someone's identity when during the Data Act's passage they would not even commit to recording someone's sex accurately? Let me be clear, Conservatives oppose mandatory digital identity. In principle, in practice. If we believed it was necessary, we'd have introduced it in government, but we chose not to because you can deliver better online services without resorting to a costly, controlling, complex and risky system. This is a cynical distraction from a desperate Prime Minister. He wants people to believe mandatory ID will fix his migration mess, but it will not. Channel crossings will continue until he introduces a real deterrent, but he hasn't got the guts to take on the lawfare industry that made him. We believe that government should empower citizens, not the other way round. That government should earn citizens' trust, not the other way round. Only those entitled to benefit should receive them. Those with no right to be here must leave. But these imperatives are not best delivered by controlling British people instead of those who don't play by the rules. The government that promised to tread lightly on our lives has got its boots out. Will the Secretary of State now kill this plan rather than be the sacrificial lamb for another of this Prime Minister's grubby mistakes?
State.
Julia Lopez's speech was a sharp attack on Labour's digital ID plan, portraying it not as modernization, but as state overreach. She accused the government of disguising a failed migration policy as a digital convenience scheme that risks creating a hacker's paradise and expanding bureaucratic control. Calling it a big, fat socialist dream, Lopez framed the proposal as an assault on privacy, choice, and trust. Her message was clear: government should serve citizens, not monitor them. By warning that trust must be earned, not demanded, Lopez turned a technical debate into a moral one, casting Conservatives as defenders of freedom against Labour's growing appetite for control.
The European Convention on Human Rights could override British law yet again, as it warns the government's approach to trans rights and certain protest laws may breach its rules. Michael O'Flaherty, an unelected Strasbourg bureaucrat and the Council of Europe's Human Rights Commissioner, says new trans guidance on biological sex and the response to Palestine Action supporters risks breaking foreign human rights laws. In letters to ministers and MPs, Mr. O'Flaherty warned that recent policies could leave trans people in an unacceptable intermediate zone and cautioned against laws that restrict peaceful assembly or force people to remove masks while demonstrating. Is it time to leave the ECHR and to decide our own rules? Well, I'm joined now by the well-known human rights campaigner, Peter Tatchell. Peter, thank you for coming in. I mean, it seems to me that Mr. O'Flaherty could be in the pay of reform because he's made this intervention at a point at which the European Convention is very unpopular, and he's done it on an area that was effectively settled by our Supreme Court just a few months ago. Is he a sort of undercover agent for us leaving the convention?
I don't think so, but the bigger point is, whatever criticism people may have of the European Convention on Human Rights, it does protect everyone against an overbearing state. It gives the individual citizen protection against abuses by the state. And that's a very important safeguard which we should all cherish. And that it will protect people who are critical of the ECHR. They will be protected. So it will prevent discrimination. It will prevent the state using powers to subject citizens to onerous punishments, a whole range of different things. And over the years, the European Convention on Human Rights has helped win all citizens much greater rights and freedoms.
I mean, there's some of that I don't disagree with at all. The issue is the detail it gets into, and that it essentially becomes a policy maker. So whether trans people should be able to use ladies' lavatories, surely that's a sensible decision to be made by UK domestic law and our Supreme Court, rather than a body that's meant to be dealing with stopping torture, which is why we signed up to it.
Well, I totally agree. We should make our laws here. But if we fail in that obligation, then I think the backstop of the European Convention is a very useful protection. And, Winston Churchill and other great Tory grandees were very pro it, precisely because they could foresee circumstances where the state could abuse its powers, and he recognised that the citizens of Britain need protection.
Yes, but it didn't occur to him that the court would ever think it was in its powers to intervene in whether people wore masks at protests. It's getting into policy making rather than what you might think of as fundamental rights. That the government should not be allowed to take you to the Tower of London and put you on the rack is something that we would all agree to. And even if an Act of Parliament allowed it, that should not happen. But this is getting into the absolute minutiae of how you police a large protest. And it seems to me that it's exceeding its authority, and it has no mandate to do that. Nobody voted for it to do that.
Well, the European Convention on Human Rights is much more than protection against torture. It is about the right of free expression, free speech, the right to protest, even for people that I disagree with. I'm glad the European Convention there is there to protect their rights. But also, European Convention rulings have ensured better rights for women, pregnant women, maternity care, pensions, rights for the elderly, workers' rights. A whole range of different policies have been advanced thanks to the protections and guarantees in the European Court of Human Rights. Now, obviously, I agree it'd be much better if these rights were decided by our own Parliament and Supreme Court. But when they've ignored the protections needed and failed to act, then I say I'm so glad the European Court was there.
But shouldn't any court have ultimately a legislature that can change the laws if the court acts beyond the powers that it was given in the first place? And that the European Court lacks that?
Well, certainly I agree that the European Court of Human Rights should not act beyond the powers set out in the Convention. But I've yet to see any examples where it has gone beyond its reach.
Peter Tatchell defends the ESHIA as a vital safeguard against government abuse, but critics argue it now interferes in UK policy on protests and gender rules. The debate isn't just legal, it's about trust and sovereignty. Supporters of leaving say Britain should make its own laws again, while others warn that without the court, citizens lose a key check on state power.